Hello, 你好 welcome back. 欢迎回来to Wisdom Wednesday with Johnny Tiger on July 5th, 2023. I think when we talk about Chinese emperors, there's usually like air of mysticism and antiquity. Like when I say the emperor of China, I think a lot of you are thinking, well, what's that? Like 5,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago? Well, officially, the last emperor of China was all the way into um, the 1900s. In fact, the last dynasty in China, the last imperial dynasty in China, didn't officially come to an end until 1912. Okay, 1912. So when you really think about it, that's just over 100 years ago. It's really not that long ago when all these emperors and queens and kings and queens and lords and all that stuff was still a big deal in the mind of Chinese people. Now, why did I start today's video with this? Because you need to understand uh, this to be able to sort of put yourself into the story I'm about to tell you. Because today I'm going to tell you the story of the last emperor of China. But this is not the last emperor as I talked about in the 19th century. No, no, no. That wouldn't be much fun. Today's story is going to sound totally ridiculous, totally hilarious, and kind of sad, but it's completely true. It's a true story. It's a incident that should not have happened, and most of us have a hard time understanding how was it that this story could even take place, but it really happened. And so, for us to understand why is it that something so ridiculous like this could take place in our modern society, we have to understand that in the mind of a lot of Chinese people, the imperial dynasties is not that long ago. I obviously, personally, I was born in 1981, so I obviously don't remember anything about the imperial dynasty. But if we trace back to my grandparents and their parents, they remember the imperial dynasty. They were there when the imperial dynasty were still being is still in the ruling class and all that stuff. So uh, before you dismiss today's story, or before you sit down and judge and say, how can people be so freaking stupid uh, to fall for something like this? Just keep in mind that to most Chinese people, imperialism is not that long ago, and it will make more sense. So, before we officially go into the story today, let me give you a rough timeline of events. Uh, 1912, the last imperial dynasty in China, officially got deposed. A democracy was ushered in, and Chinese people became a democratic society. Between 1912 and 1937, there were a couple of attempts by various individuals and military generals and governors trying to install themselves as emperors. One of the first one was one of the original uh, people that overthrew the imperial dynasty by the name of Yuan Shikai. Yuan Shikai decided that being a president wasn't good enough. He wanted to be emperor, and he only lasted 80 days before he got thrown out of office. So that moved us up to 1937, which was when Japanese people invaded China. Now, Japanese people tried to hook up with the last imperial emperor, the guy that got deposed in 1912. and they tried to put him back as the Chinese emperor. And basically, they wanted him to be their puppet. They wanted to install him so he could rule China and they could rule him. Needless to say, that didn't go either. That didn't work. So, 1945, Japanese people lost the war. China went back to a couple of years of peace. However, that peace didn't last long because that peace soon turned into a civil war between the Democratic Party and the Communist Party. And in 1949, the Communist Party officially claimed China, officially took over China, and the Democrat uh, escaped to Taiwan and set up the uh, uh, new Republic of China in Taiwan, uh, which is a completely different uh, chaos and different mess that we can talk about for a long time. So let's just move forward. So just remember that. So 1949, Communist Party took over China. So after that, mm, because the Communist Party, they didn't really fool around. They didn't tolerate any kind of nonsense, any kind of democratic process, any kind of freedom. There's very little freedom. So for the longest time, there's no more sorts of emperors or resurrections and insurrections or any kind of new rebellions or stuff like that. Because anytime there was a rebellion, it usually got put down very swiftly and very violently. Okay? Now, uh, just take a moment to appreciate those of us that are here in North America can watch these YouTube videos and talk about things like this. Just take a moment right now to appreciate the fact that we have the freedom, we have the democracy, we enjoy what we have. Because for people who grew up in China in the 40s and 50s, it was a completely different system, completely different world. Okay, and it's a kind of world that most of us can't even begin to imagine. Uh, uh, a lot of people like to say, well, if people were so unhappy, if things were that hard, why didn't they move to a different country? If you say that, then all I can say is you are obviously not like an immigrant. You have never been a refugee. You have never been an immigrant. You probably were born here in Canada. You probably were born here in United States. You probably were born here in the UK, because only people who never gone through immigration can make it sound so easy. Believe me, immigration, even when you are moving from a civilized country to another civilized country, like Canada to US, it's difficult enough. Right? You try to move from countries of completely different system, like communism country to a democratic system, where those countries are not even friends, it's nearly impossible. Okay, every year there are hundreds, thousands, millions of people trying to cross the border into United States. There are thousands of people drowning in the ocean going from Africa to trying to get into the UK in boats floating on driftwood. Why do they risk their life? Why do they do it? Because it's not easy. There's no other way. Okay, so yes, some people did get out of China and went to Hong Kong, went to Taiwan, but many people died doing that. Okay, so it's not easy. I just want to take this chance, and I know I'm digressing a little bit, but I want to make it clear to you guys, I was an immigrant. I wasn't a refugee, but I was an immigrant. My father got us to come to Canada. And even though we had loads of money, it was very difficult. It wasn't easy. It's not like you decide, oh, life is so difficult here. Let's go to another country. No, it's not that simple. To kind of put it into a little bit of a perspective for those of you that have no concept of how difficult it is, I'm sure most of you have complained about where you live is uncomfortable, or where you work is not nice, or you didn't like the school. Now imagine if I just tell you, well, if you don't like it, why don't you go to another school? If you don't like it, why don't you move to a different house? If you don't like it, why don't you find a different job? Easy for me to say, right? But yeah, obviously it's not that simple. Finding a different job, finding a comparable job with good pay, good vacation, good benefit, finding a different house, be able to afford that house, be able to afford to move, finding a different school, have to go through the different district, a different jurisdiction, and the school have to want to take you in the first place. So if uh, moving to a different school, different house, different job can be that difficult, imagine if you're trying to leave your country and go to a different country, right? Okay, so I don't want to dwell on this for too long because it's really got nothing to do with our story of the day. But I just want to take this chance to sort of clear that because I hear this all the time when people say, "Oh, if they are not happy in China, why don't they go elsewhere? Why do they stay there?" Because they didn't have any choice. That's why. Okay. So moving forward from 1949, when the Communist Party took over China, every thing was relatively stable for a while until out of nowhere, 1985, a guy by the name of Zheng Yinlong suddenly proclaimed himself to be an emperor. Yeah, he did. And he actually sort of got away with it for a short time. And today, this is a story I'm going to tell you today. It's a story of Zheng Yinlong, the modern emperor of China. Actually, to call him the emperor of China is a little bit of over exaggeration because Zheng Yilong actually didn't want to be an emperor of China. He wanted to create his own new country, and his nation was called Dayou, Dayou Nation, which is very interesting and part of the reason why I want to do this episode because Dayou happened to be my Mandarin name. Uh, but that's skipping forward a little bit. So let's backtrack and start from the very beginning, shall we? In 1982, the Communist Party of China officially decreed that the one-child policy had to be enforced. This means most households could only have one child, and if now uh, again, I don't want to dwell too long on this. I don't want to get into a debate on if the one child policy was right or wrong, or humane or inhumane. They did it. It's no longer there. They did away with it. So yeah, it's behind us. Okay. No matter what I think of it, what you think of it, it's done and over with. But I will say this: a lot of people do have a kind of a mistaken idea about what the one-child policy was. People think that they if you have more than one child, they'll kill your child, or they'll force you to give out the child, or they'll take you to jail and shoot you, execute you, or stuff like that. No, none of that, right? The one child policy basically said if you have more than one child, your additional children cannot be registered. They cannot get any benefit. You will not get any help from the government. That's all. So rich people, really rich people, could still have as many children as they want if they could afford to feed the children themselves. The one-child policy was more to stop people who were poor from having loads and loads of children and then end up having to sell those children into slavery or having to rely on social benefit and stuff like that. Um, with that said, there were many officials, city officials, especially in the more uh, rural areas, in the more mountainous regions where people were not as educated, when where the one-child policy were uh, a little bit overly enforced, right? Like a lot of us have no concept of how big China is. So it's hard for us to understand why things got out of hand. But there are many, many parts of China, even today, that have no TV, no running water. People are not educated. People are dirt farmers. They spend their day working in the dirt, growing stuff, raising chicken. Uh, these people just like these people back then, they don't understand what is it that these policies are meant to do. They don't understand what these policies were saying. So a lot of the time, when the one-child policy got to these regions, they met fierce resistance from the farmers and the people that live in the more poor and uneducated part of the country. Uh, and as a result, the officials, the police, and the mayor or uh, town marshal in these places went out of the way to oppress these people. And because these town marshals and mayors and city officials, they're not that educated themselves either. So the way they did things were a lot more extreme than the original policy called for. Um, so it became a nightmare for everybody. You have the poor people, the civilians that are trying to have more than one baby, and then they're fighting the one-child policy, and then you have the not very civilized, the not very well educated officials trying to come down really hard on these people, and this created the backdrop, the origin of our story for today. So, like I said, 1982, one child policy came into effect, and a lot of people in these poor regions of China became extremely unhappy. What do you mean we can't have more than one child? We Chinese people have had 10, 20 children for thousands of years. We can have as many children as we want. We start having children when we are 11 years old, and we don't stop until we're dead. What do you mean we can't have more than one children? That's against God's will. Yada, 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 yada. It just go on and on and on. Um, so a lot of the farmers and mountain folks and hillbillies, they ended up doing something crazy, which was they would move from province to province. They would have one child in this province, get that child registered, and then they would uh, give that child to like have their cousin or someone take care of that child, and then they and their wife would move to a different province and have another baby, get that baby registered in that province, and that's what they would do to try to get through the loophole of trying to register more than one child in their family. And it was in this kind of a cat and mouse uh, environment where the government is trying to crack down people having baby, people trying to have more and more baby without the government knowing that our uh, main character, Zheng Yunlong, became an emperor. Who was this Zheng Yunlong? Was he like what was he someone really special? Well, no. Zheng Yilong was just a farmer, a dirt farmer from a unknown region, very poor region of China. No one even know when he was born, where he originally lived, where he grew up. He's basically nobody. He's a nobody. Uh, but Zheng Yilong wanted to have more children. He already had two daughters at the time, so he decided to sell his farm and then leave the province and go. Him and his wife took their two daughters and went all the way across to northern China, and they had a third child there. So he finally got a son. They have two daughters and a son, and then Zheng Yinlong spent a couple of years living in fear that the government would find out what he did. So he moved from place to place, working menial jobs, basically living on the verge of starvation. So how did a guy like this become an emperor? Well, because he got roped into it by a childhood friend of his by the name of Ma Xin. So who is Ma Xin? Ma Xin, like I said, was Zheng Yinlong's childhood friend, and Ma Xin was a very kind of respected fortune teller in the little town that both of them lived in. Now, Ma Xin was very well read. He read a lot of history, he read a lot of books, and he had this wild ambition of becoming a king's prime minister. He wanted to be a prime minister, and he believed by looking at his own fortune that it's in his destiny to be a prime minister. But there's a problem. You can't be a prime minister without a country, a nation, you can minister over. You can't be a prime minister unless there's a king or queen or emperor to appoint you to be prime minister. Uh, so Ma Xin started hatching this plot to make his prime minister dream come true. Like I said, most of the people in these little towns, these remote towns, were not educated at all. So someone like Machine was a really big deal because he actually could tell fortune. People believed that he knew a lot of history. He was really smart. People even believed that he knew magic. Right? So Machine decided to use Zheng Yinlong as the prime candidate for an emperor, and he told Zheng Yilong, if I make you emperor, you can make me prime minister, and then we can rule our new nation together. Okay, so some people might be thinking, well, that just sounds crazy, right? Yeah, I know. It sounds crazy, but you got to remember, Zheng Yilong is like hiding from the law. He's living in fear of the government every day because he had more than one child. And he's always on the verge of starvation. So when he heard that Ma Xin, who he really respected and trusted, he believed that he heard Ma Xin say, I can make you an emperor. Zheng Yinlong kind of went with it. He was sure, okay, fine. I'll be emperor, and you can be prime minister. Great. So Ma Xin staged a very elaborate uh, show of catching a giant salamander in the local river. He told the local townsfolk and farmers that there is going to be a new emperor, a new nation sprouting up from the local village. And gods have sent down a giant salamander as a sign. And so he took all the town folks to the river. He found the giant salamander that he previously bought and put in that river. Uh, and he cut the salamander's belly open. Inside the salamander's belly, there was a rolled up silk parchment. On the silk parchment was a whole bunch of really ancient looking Chinese text that said, include the word 大有, and include the word 真龙, and means real dragon, and then include the word emperor. And Ma Xin said, see, look, this is obviously a sign from the god. Otherwise, why would the salamander have a rolled out parchment of silk in its stomach? And then on this silk, look, it said 大有. 大有translate to have everything. Everyone should have everything. Everyone should share everything. This obviously is God's will that we should have ev- any among the children we want. We can have any among the children we want because 大有 means have everything. Um, so this should be the name of our new kingdom. And look, they said real dragon, 真龙, 真龙. Well, there's a guy from our local town. His name is 真银龙. Listen to that again. 真龙, real dragon. 真银龙, the name of our emperor, right? So Ma Xin basically said, look, it's God's will. It's real dragon, 真龙, and the emperor. It said it's going to be emperor. So obviously, God's want 真银龙 to be our emperor. Again, I know a lot of you are cringing at this point and think, how this is so stupid. How can this, like, how did the people fall for this? Again, people hated the one child policy. People were desperate. People were not educated. People missed, some of them missed the old imperial system. They missed the old dynasty. These were the people that still have mom and dad, grandma, granddad that remember the kings and queens. So when they saw that, yeah, there's a giant salamander and there is a parchment from the gods inside the salamander, they totally went along with that. So, um, long story short, in a few days, uh, Zheng Yinlong proclaimed himself to be the new emperor, and uh, and Ma Xin originally wanted to be prime minister, but then he had a change of mind. He said to Zheng Yinlong, "You know what? I don't want to be prime minister. I want to be the minister of defense. I want to be the minister of defense so I can be in charge of our armed forces." Because Ma Xin, like I said, very smart guy. He read a lot of books, so he understood that the guy who's in charge of the military has real power. So uh, Ma Xin became the Minister of Defense, and a guy by the name of Liu Daquan became the Prime Minister. Now Liu Daquan really doesn't have a lot of place in this story, in this narrative, but it's important to note that Liu Daquan became the Prime Minister. So now, the new emperor, Zheng Yinlong, and he had about 100 followers at that time. They set up the new nation called 大有 Nation, the kingdom that have everything. Um, so how big was 大有 Nation, you might ask? Well, it's basically the three villages, the village that Zheng Yinlong was in, and the neighboring two villages combined together. That's what he called his 大有 nation. He proclaimed that anything beyond 大有 nation's border count as foreign power, and he denounced the Communist Party. He denounced China. He said that's not China. Uh, all the provinces should be their own nation. So the Canton province would be the Canton nation. Beijing would be Beijing nation, and so on and so on. So basically, him and his prime minister and his minister of defense, these three farmers, these three uh, uh, uneducated louts got together and decided to remap the entire China. Now, if they just kept it at this, if they just, okay, be content at this, then they probably would have enjoyed their little game for a little bit longer. Because at this time, around 1985, there's so much going on in China. So and like I said, this happened in a very remote part of China. So the central government didn't probably didn't even know about it. And the local government probably just thought this was some bunch of crazy guys. They're like, okay, whatever, whatever. Like the mayor and officials didn't want to like burst their bubble and just let them play their little games. Whatever, 100 guys want to call their village the new Dayo Nation. So whatever. Let them do it. Uh, However, Zheng Yinlong and more importantly, Ma Xin, the Minister of Defense, weren't content with that. So Zheng Yinlong sent his 100 followers into the neighboring towns and villages to recruit people for his royal army. And again, I'm sighing because this is so dumb. Again, but because people really were not educated at the time, and people believed in Zheng Yinlong being the god destined, the god appointed emperor because of that giant salamander stuff, and people believe that the Minister of Defense Ma Xin is a smart fellow and knew magic and all that stuff. People believed in them. So the neighboring towns, the neighboring places, people start flocking to Zheng Yinlong's nonsense. I want to say flock to his banner, but he didn't even have a banner. They just flocked to his nonsense. Uh, Zheng Yinlong even made his first decree. His first decree was any family that can produce more than 10 children will become noble blood. Yeah, he understood. You can't have a nation without nobility. You need to have some like high nobles and knights and noble ladies, noblemen, and stuff like that. So he decided that the way to decide who is noble should be people who could produce the most children would become nobility. And this really sit well with most of the people in that region because, like I said, they all hated the one-child policy. So basically, here's an emperor that tell you, go ahead, have as many children as you like, and if you can have more than 10, then you become nobility. You can rule over the rest. Whoa, this was like super big deal for all the farmers and ranchers and people like that in that region. So people started flocking to his village, and within a short half a month, Zheng Yinlong and Ma Xin and Liu Daquan, remember the prime minister Liu Daquan, the three of them have gathered over 2,000 people, uh, and they were quickly becoming a force to be reckoned with. Now, some of you might think that 2,000 people, that's nothing. That you still can't make a nation out of that. And you are right. You're right. But when you live in a remote part of China where like there's not that many people to begin with, and like the villages are kind of far apart, when you suddenly gather a force of 2,000 people and you proclaim that that is your royal army, and this kind of scary, right? Not only that, the Minister of Defense, Ma Xin, also spent the next month and a half training these 2,000 farmers, ranchers, beggars, whatever, all the people that uh, came to serve their new emperor. He trained them in warfare or whatever warfare he read from books. He taught them how to kill people. He taught them how to engage in battle. He taught them how to swing swords and spears. But these people obviously didn't have swords or spears. They didn't have guns. So they made do with axes and machetes and trowels and garden shears and rakes and uh, pitchforks and stuff like that. And they had a plan. After 2 months of the Dayou nation was proclaimed, uh, on one foggy morning, without any kind of premonition, without any kind of fanfare, Zheng Yinlong, followed by his Minister of Defense Ma Xin and his Prime Minister Liu Daquan, and their 2,000 strong royal army armed with machetes and saws and trowels and rakes and axes, stormed the seat of the county. They went into the city that was the seat of the county, scared the crap out of everybody in the city because suddenly you have 2,000 people marching in carrying any kind of sickness, whatever they could find to use as weapon. And what did they do? Well, you might think they would storm the city police station or the government building, or you might think they would go storm the bank and take all the money. Nope. I think a lot of you would be surprised when you learn that Zheng Yinlong's first target was not the bank, was not the police station, was not the government building. He took his 2,000 royal army and they stormed the county hospital. Upon taking control of the county hospital, they took everybody there hostage: doctors, nurses, custodians, and security guards. They took everybody there hostage, and uh, Zheng Yinlong made a show of taking all the contraception material, condoms and rings and IUD and anything they can find that have to do with birth control, and put them on a big pile on the lawn of the hospital and build a big bonfire and burn everything. Standing in front of the bonfire, Zheng Yinlong announced to the world that I am the new emperor of the Daoyou nation, and I decree that any kind of birth control is evil magic, and we are not going to allow people to practice it anymore. And this is my first act as an emperor, is to destroy this device that let people practice this evil magic. And then he did something even crazier. He had his people pick out 40 of the most beautiful nurses, and he announced that these nurses will be his concubine, and one of them will be his queen. These nurses were not given any choice to say no. Uh, the few that tried to argue how crazy this was almost got executed on the spot. And after that, Zheng Yinlong decided that, hey, this hospital is pretty big, pretty well built. We'll use this hospital as my new palace, my new castle. This will be great. This will be the symbol of our Dayo nation. He really should have left after burning the contraception, because just as he's ready to make the hospital into his new home, his new palace, the army arrived. I'm not talking about his army. I'm not talking about his 2,000 royal army. I'm talking about the real army, the Chinese People's Liberation Army, the Red Army, arrived. When Zheng Yinlong and his 2,000 followers came into the county seat, came into the city, and freaked everyone out. Obviously, the chief of police uh, uh, called it in and reported to the higher authority. Hey, we got a situation here. The 2,000 madmen here wanting to say they got a new emperor and they want to make this a new nation. Like I said, if they didn't do this, they probably would have been ignored for a long time and they could play their little Dayo Nation game for a long time. But storming a county seat, storming a city with 2,000 people armed with weapons, that no longer can be tolerated. So, the few hours that Zheng Yinlong and his people spent messing around, playing their little game at the hospital, making the nurses his concubine, burning the contraception, and trying to make the hospital into their new castle, their new palace. gave the army the time to mobilize. And next thing you know, and next thing Zheng Yinlong and his people knew, the entire hospital was surrounded by the People's Liberation Army. Now, this is not like the Canadian Armed Forces or the riot police or the U.S. Army. Like some of you might be thinking, okay, so the army, that's no big deal. The Communist Army, the People's Liberation Army, they were not going to mess around. They were not fooling. There's no such thing as freedom. There's no such thing as mercy or human rights in China at that time. So, as soon as uh, they saw the real army surround the hospital, most of the royal armed forces, most of Zheng Yinlong's royal army, threw down their weapons, put their arms in the air, and surrendered. However, the prime minister Liu Daqian made the fatal error of assuming that the military wouldn't dare to shoot him in front of all this media and reporters and stuff like that. So he grabbed a, a weapon, like an axe or something. He grabbed a weapon. I don't know what weapon it was because the original news only said he took a weapon from one of his followers and he charged toward one of the soldiers. Like I said, communist soldiers didn't mess around. So here comes this farmer armed with a weapon. The soldier shot him in the face. Well, bye bye, Prime Minister. The Minister of Defense, Ma Xin, saw that this was going to go down really badly. He took the nurses hostage and tried to use them to shield himself while he made his getaway. However, he was shot in the stomach by an army sniper, and down he went. Seeing that his Prime Minister was dead, and most of his followers had surrendered, and his Minister of Defense was seriously wounded. Zheng Yulong very smartly put up his hand and let himself be arrested. Thus ended the 2 or 3 months long life of Dayou Nation, a crazy, ridiculous, hilarious incident that should never have happened, but it actually happened. Even after they took him away to jail, even after they put him in jail, Zheng Yinlong maintained that he was destined to be emperor. And because, honestly, Zheng Yinlong was a pretty nice guy. So while he was in jail, everybody joked with him and called him Your Majesty. Even the warden of the jail called him Your Majesty. Zheng Yinlong probably showing signs of mental deficiency by this time, probably showing some sign of madness by this time, even went out of his way to knight the two wardens of the jail because he said they were so nice to him, and since he's the emperor, he should knight them. So the jail wardens by the name of Wang and Wang both became knights. Uh, at least that's a a little joke that they shared in the prison. So they became known as Knight Wang and Knight Wang. um, so that basically finished up our tale of this silly, ridiculous event, the modern emperor of the Dayou nation that sprouted out in 1985. That only lasted for like 3 months. And Zheng Yilong, as far as I know, is still in jail. He was sentenced to life in jail. As far as I know, he still believes that he's the true emperor today, and people in jail still call him Your Majesty.